morning to everybody in YouTube land. I had quite an interesting experience yesterday at work. I have one of my patients comes from a Haredi background and is interested in exploring the outside world and has been for years, and can pretty much fit in anywhere at this point in life. But will ask me questions about the world, and to me, I don't consider myself. I'm not a missionary to make everybody be like me. My approach is I'm here to share, and I would like for Jews to be frum. I would prefer it. Although my feeling is that if a Jew is not going to be frum, then they really shouldn't have so much a strong Jewish identity. However, or at least not claim to be representing other Jews. But they can. I see sometimes though. I get taught lessons with this. I see certain people who are struggling with their emunah, struggling with Yiddishkeit, but their Jewish identity is strong and very Hamish. So, how do we, and even spiritual and religious, even, with their expressions of doubt and skepticism about faith, issues of faith. And so what does that exactly mean? How do we approach that? All right, so the different things we can discuss there. But that being said, I do believe that questioning faith and examining other beliefs really strengthen our faith. I've discussed this in several videos, how in a way investigating atheism and looking into it can really bring a person closer to God, because as it says in the Psalms, if I go up to heaven, you are there. I go down to hell, you are there. Which means to tell us that the total, unity of God brings us to this experience where we can find God in the places that we would probably least expect to find God. Why bananas here? That's a surprise. Okay. We pass this Prius. This client of mine in the hospital where I work, this patient, asked me to explain the theory of evolution. And I came to certain realizations and things in explaining this. I didn't, after contemplating this after the fact, I wish I would have said this, now. And on my way to work this morning, I was listening to some videos on YouTube from some creation scientists, who I know, obviously, a lot of people question their scientific credentials, and I'm just using the parlance that they use, calling them creation scientists. And I would venture to say that the creation scientists are not using the scientific method. They're not true scientists. However, I do believe it is important to study their beliefs and be aware of them. And a religious person, I believe, can find inspiration and even truth that's not scientific, but is a kind of revealed religious truth in some of these aspects of their teachings, even if it's not following the scientific method. However, and I think also it's just as I think it's healthy to question religious dogmas in order to understand them better. I think, on the other hand, if someone does believe in evolution or so forth, it's important, or whatever anyone believes in. Let's say you're politically conservative or politically, I won't use the term liberal because they're not really liberal, what they call progressive, which is also not really progressive, they're really regressive. But to look into what you, and the thing is modern day American conservatism isn't really conservative. It's really classical liberalism and libertarianism, with an interest in preserving liberty vis-a-vis maintaining certain conservative values, if you really look into it. And that's, we see, the difference between the true American right and what's called the alt-right, which, as I've said before, is really a branch of the left. It's really taking the left-wing ideology and rebranding it to try to draw people away from the authentic right by grasping onto certain stereotypes of the right that are not really true, and hijacking them. It's almost like what they're doing is they're taking like what a Saturday Night Live caricature of the right and taking the left-wing values and applying them, and the progressive movement values, which are not progressive but rather regressive, as is demonstrated by the alt-right. Meaning, if we look and compare the left and the alt-right, we see they're basically the same thing, just intellectually. They're just being taken in different, they're just being used in different cultures, really, essentially. Meaning the way that the left treats minorities is really the way that the alt-right treats the majority, and the way that which is totally the opposite of how the true American right views individuals. The true American right would say that the most important minority is the minority of one, is the individual, no matter what your race or religion or whatever it is. And yet, there was a movie in the 40s, Don't Be a Sucker, people should look over this movie where the guy says, he's listening to someone up on a soapbox, and he says, that the problems are the blacks and the Catholics and this one and that one and the Jews and the foreigners, and then it says the Freemasons. And then the fellow's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm a Freemason, And then a fellow comes up to him and he says, I couldn't believe I would see this in America. And he said, what do you mean? You're not American. He says, yes, I am American. I used to be, whatever, Hungarian, but I immigrated to America and I'm an American citizen. And this fellow says, don't be a sucker. And he says, the most important minority is the minority of one, is the individual. It's in public domain. You can find it on YouTube. It's a very important film to look at. But anyway, that being said, questioning yourself and questioning your beliefs is an extremely healthy exercise, because what it comes to do is it teaches you how to think And why do you believe what you believe? When you confront the questions of your beliefs, you become much more understanding in why you believe what you believe. This has been an ideology in Judaism for millennia. Meaning, when you look at the Talmud, and when people talk of the hair-splitting logic of the Talmud, and people often, see it as inconsequential, the fact of the matter is it's really, it trains you how to think. I was thinking this morning, I was like, if I keep quoting the same source over and over again, it's going to look like I don't know anything else. But it just happens to be what I'm reading now, and I'm reading very slowly, because on weekdays I have a phone. Shabbos I don't have a phone, and I try to learn a lot on Shabbos, but when there's a certain room in the house that you have to spend time in, where you're not allowed to learn Torah, so I read other books. And I'm currently reading, a few pages a week, the autobiography of Bishop Fulton Sheen, who was, of course, a famous media personality in addition to being a Catholic bishop. And Bishop Sheen was also an intellectual and a philosopher, a professor, and he says that he asked a particular question in theology to his students, and the dean, who was, I guess, a bishop, and he was a priest at the time. I mean, a bishop was also a priest, but what I'm saying, Monsignor or whatever was above him. He felt that the question was unfair and maybe even bordering on heretical. But Bishop Sheen was feeling that no, I want to see, does this student know how to think, and I want to train him how to think. I want to teach him how to think, not just to repeat and regurgitate information, but how to think on your own. And a major way and so he challenged a dogmatic issue in the Catholic Church. Of course, he had an answer that he was looking for, but he challenged it by presenting a different theological approach and asking why, with an assumption, a dogmatic assumption, that this would be the answer. That this is the answer. But the question is why did, quote unquote, why did God do it this way as opposed to doing it that way? Essentially, that's really, what the question was. That being said, so we and I think we can apply that, as I'll say, you should believe. If someone says there's wisdom among the nations, you should believe it. That goes without saying, but it makes me sound a little frum when I quote Chazal and show that they're the ones. And so to find a wise idea like that from a source of a different religion, I don't have a problem with that. And without getting into the theology that he was discussing, although it was quite interesting. So that being said, I don't have a problem teaching the theory of evolution to people, even though I question the theory, because I think it's worthwhile to understand what the theory really is. And that being said, I remember some years ago seeing an old website, maybe even back in the 90s. I was watching yesterday, on Hulu, they have all the episodes of Seinfeld. So I went to Hulu and I watched the Chinese restaurant episode, mostly just because I get a kick out of the fact that it makes reference to Plan 9 from Outer Space. And movie riffing, which now knowing the old friendship that Jerry Seinfeld and Joel Hodgson had back in the 80s, and it puts that episode into a different light. So this person, this patient of mine, asked that I should explain the theory of evolution, and after contemplating this afterwards, I remember a website that I saw back in the 90s where it said "Evolution, a fairy tale for adults." Now, what I realized from this is as follows, though, is that evolution as it's presented in popular culture and in popular education, we would say popular science, right? So I wouldn't call it popular academia because it's not really academic, but it's the popular education system. And the way that most people see the theory of evolution is a fairy tale. I'm saying by scientific standards. Even though this website was a creationist website trying to dissuade people from believing in the theory of evolution, the fact of the matter is that the way evolution is taught and the way evolution is believed in the standard world is a fairy tale. Meaning, and it's such a fairy tale that I don't mean to say this, but it seems to fit into a religious narrative. Where one would almost have to say that they are being taught a theory of what we call today intelligent design. Meaning, there is a theory that tries to present itself as being more scientific than the creation scientists, and that is intelligent design, which means to say we're not going to tell you which God to believe in, but it seems pretty obvious that something intelligent designed the universe that we exist in. Now, if you see evolution as a straight line, which is the fairy tale version of evolution, which nobody really believes, no scientists believe. I mean, I guess a lot of lay people believe, but no scientist believes in the quote-unquote fairy tale version of evolution today. Maybe at one point in history it was believed. But in the fairy tale version of evolution, the question would be, wait a second, if we came from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? Right? That's the question that a lot of folks ask. And the answer is, of course, we don't come from monkeys. I'm saying the scientific answer is we and the monkeys come from a common ancestor. And then we and the apes come from a more recent common ancestor. And then we and the various extinct hominids come from a more recent common ancestor. Meaning to say, the theory would be from the fairy tale version is that the Australopithecus became the Piltdown man, and the Piltdown man became the Australopithecus begat the Piltdown man, and the Piltdown man begat the whatever the I don't know, we'll say the I don't remember what are one of the other the other, the Peking man, and the Peking man begot the Neanderthal, and the Neanderthal begat the Cro-Magnon, and the Cro-Magnon begat the Homo sapiens, and that's totally understood to be false, to the point where, of course, most scientists will say there is no Cro-Magnon. The Cro-Magnon is the modern man, but moreover, that the Neanderthal and the Cro-Magnon, or the modern Homo sapiens, do come from a common ancestor, but not that one became another. So yes, and I didn't say this yesterday, but the fact is, evolution, as it's understood, but in the popular culture, how it's presented, like in The Simpsons or something, is a fairy tale. Now, it could very well be true. I mean, I don't meaning to say that could be how God did all of these things. How that could be, but that's not the origin of species. Meaning, when Darwin wrote the Origin of Species, what he did was, I'll use the nomenclature of the creation scientists, and say as follows: the what Darwin observed was what the creation scientists will call microevolution, and what what he extrapolated from that is what the creation scientists will call macroevolution. And what the creation science will say is that they do believe in microevolution because that's basically a scientific fact, but they will not believe in macroevolution. Whereas, it is a lot more complicated than that. And that's why evolution is taught today as a fairy tale in popular academia or education, which is not necessarily academic. More over, what I would call popular academia it's just that it's popular academia because it's not true academia. It's a watered down version of academia. Just like how religion is taught in most places is not really. I'm saying how most people think of religion is also not what religion really is. Meaning that's the facts of the matter is that things are a lot more complicated than we think. It's not the simple approach that we tend to embrace in society today. But that being said, but people like things to be simple. People like things to be cut and dry and black and white. And when I was explaining to my patient, who's a highly intelligent individual, explaining to them the theory of evolution, they felt it was going over their head. So it's it is what it is. I mean, I explained it, not how I'm explaining it now. I mean, I explained it scientifically speaking, how various, there is a, what we call the survival of the fittest, that's pretty easy to understand, that, because most life today reproduces sexually, you have diversity in the offspring. You'll have, two parents could have, the same two parents could have 10 different kids, and each one is different genetically. One is going to have brown eyes, and one could have green eyes, one could have blonde hair, one could have brown hair, and they all come from the same parents. That's the benefit of that's a major benefit of sexual reproduction, is diversity. And diversity thereby begets animals that are different, or plants that are different, and as they spread to different environments, they develop into different what is that? Oh my goodness. They develop into different forms, and that's basically how it works. Now, and so the form, like we talk about, this is what I explain, we talk about the finches of Darwin's finches on the Galapagos Islands, how he found the biodiversity on the different islands because the different finches were developed for different environments. And that's pretty much, everybody accepts that that's true, that, and of course it's somewhat a roll of a dice, meaning you're going to have a bunch of, finches will have broods of finches, and some will have big beaks and some will have small beaks, and eventually, on this island, the big beak birds are going to survive, and the little beak birds will die out. And on that island, the little beak birds will survive, and the big beak birds will die out, to the point where you're going to lose that genetic information and only have big beak birds on this island, and only have small beak birds on that island. Now, the strong argument that creation scientists bring to know the difference between microevolution and macroevolution, whereas the evolutionists will say they're just the same thing. It just, one takes longer than the other. But the creationists will say, when microevolution happens, genetic information is lost and not gained. You don't have a net gain, you have a net loss, which is true. Of course, there are answers to that as well, as to why, and generally the scientists will say every now and then there are mutations, but even the mutations themselves are essentially a loss of information. Of course, the creation scientists will say, well, how often do you find beneficial mutations? And you don't find them that often, but given enough time, it could happen. But there are beneficial mutations. Probably one documented beneficial mutation is lactose tolerance, meaning the standard would, 70% of human beings are lactose intolerant. We think it's strange in America, but in other countries, that's what's common. And the fact of the matter is that it's lactose tolerance that's the mutation. That's the yotzim min haklal. So, there are answers to this, and, and so, now, that doesn't mean to say that evolution is a scientific fact. What it just means to say is that it's, the theory is a lot more complex. I'm not saying stronger or weaker, but it's a lot more complex. And certain dogmas should be questioned. There are dogmas within the theory of evolution that are taught that really should not be taught, and and there are issues with that, or should not be taught in a dogmatic way, and there are outright falsehoods as well. But that being said, I think it's still important to be educated and to know not only the actual scientific belief of the theory of evolution, but also to be aware of the popular belief and to recognize the difference between them. And really, I think, that's also, it's interesting on a sociological level of how the popular idea of evolution is, first of all, so false, and second of all, so popular, and it creates a new. It's almost how we see the development of religion, from a sociological viewpoint, and that's something quite interesting to study on a sociological level. Similarly, how different theories about extraterrestrials and so forth, for ancient civilizations and various other ideas should be examined and understood. All right, well, thank you for watching. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little tired now. I'm at work now, although I don't have any programs today. I'm gonna go do visits and one-on-one and try to give some chizuk. Thank you for watching. God bless. Please like, share, and subscribe, and comment. And I'm very interested to hear more about this. All right. God bless you. Be well.